If my son hadn't whispered when he did, I might have missed the moment my life fell apart. We were standing on the south lawn of Bellwood Estate, just outside Savannah. The garden was drenched in early fall sunlight, golden and soft, like the perfect filter had been applied to everything. Rows of guests turned their heads as the string quartet began the bride's entrance song. Somewhere behind us, the white double doors would open, and my sister would begin her walk down the aisle. That's when Noah tugged my sleeve. His voice was hushed but firm. "Mom, we need to leave. Now." I bent toward him, confused. "What? Sweetheart, the wedding's starting." He cut me off. "Please, just look." He pulled a phone from his blazer pocket. Not his, not mine. I recognized the cracked rose gold case and the little hummingbird charm immediately. Camille's phone. I felt my stomach tighten. "Noah, where did you get this?" "I found it by the drink table," he said. "I thought it was Jenna's. I picked it up and something was playing. I didn't mean to hear it, but..." He handed it to me with both hands, like it was something fragile. On the screen, a voice memo was paused mid-play. The title was nothing special, just Tuesday night. But I already felt the dread pooling behind my ribs. I tapped play. The voices were grainy, but familiar. Camille, laughing, low and intimate. Gavin, my husband, speaking just below a whisper. "You always did like pretending you weren't doing anything wrong," she said. He answered with a sigh that made my throat close. "It's only wrong if she finds out." Camille's voice was lighter. "She won't. Renee always sees what she wants to see." I pressed pause. My fingers were trembling. My throat was dry. My heart? I couldn't feel it beating. I stared out across the garden at the guests smiling, waiting for the bride. I turned slowly toward Gavin. He stood a few rows ahead, chatting with Derek's cousin like it was any other Saturday in October. His suit was pressed. His cufflinks shimmered in the sun. His laugh floated across the breeze. He looked normal, ordinary, like a man whose whole life wasn't about to collapse. "I am Renee Carter, 42, family therapist, wife, mother of 2, and until that moment, I thought I was the kind of person who could read between the lines. I made a career out of helping other people understand betrayal, how it grows, how it hides, how it burns. But I had missed the one happening in my own home. Or maybe I hadn't missed it. Maybe I had just hoped I was wrong." Camille, my sister, is 3 years younger, all elegance and spark. She has always been the center of any room she walks into. Our parents call her their wildflower. I was the steady one, the listener. She made messes. I cleaned them up. Today was supposed to be her day, her second marriage actually, but her first real one, as she kept saying. She was marrying Derek Foster, a man she'd met on a real estate panel in Charleston and somehow convinced into proposing within 6 months. The venue was grand, the guests upscale, the wine imported from Napa. And now I had Camille's phone in my hand, a confession in my ears, and my son, my sweet, quiet Noah, standing beside me, holding his breath like he was afraid he'd done something wrong. "You did the right thing," I whispered, squeezing his hand. He nodded, eyes wide. "I didn't want to hurt you." "You didn't." I took a breath. "You saved me." Beside us, Jenna was adjusting her hair, unaware. She looked so calm, so much like me at 16. I thought about how much I wanted to protect her from this, how badly I wanted to undo what I'd just heard, but I couldn't. I turned the phone over and slid it into my purse. My heart was still pounding, but slower now. Not from panic, something colder, focused. I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet, but I knew I wasn't going to let this wedding go on like everything was fine, not without answers, not without consequences. The music changed again, Camille's cue. Guests turned, and then she appeared. She walked into the garden wearing a champagne silk gown that clung to her like a secret. The fabric shimmered with every step. Her smile was luminous, the kind you practice in a mirror. She moved with confidence, eyes locked on Derek at the altar, who looked at her like she was made of something eternal. I stared at her, At the woman who once braided my hair on our front porch in summer, the woman who used to crawl into my bed after breakups and cry into my shoulder, the woman who had sat across from me just weeks ago, asking if I thought she'd finally gotten love right this time. And I felt nothing. Not rage, not heartbreak, not even grief. Just a sudden, hollow quiet. The kind that doesn't come from silence but from the space where something meaningful used to live. I looked at my sister, and I didn't feel like I knew her anymore, and that, more than anything, terrified me. Before that whisper in the garden, before the phone in Noah's hand, and before the silence inside me turned into something sharp, there were signs. They were small at first, barely there. The kind of signs you only catch if you're looking, and I wasn't. Or maybe I was, but only in the way people look when they don't want to find what they're afraid of. Gavin and I had been married for 17 years. We met right after college in Atlanta, both working at a nonprofit that barely paid rent, but gave us purpose. He was steady and self-assured, the kind of man who made promises and kept them. We built a life from scratch, scraped together furniture, Sunday night meal plans, late-night talks over cheap red wine. When our second child was born, we moved to Savannah and bought a modest brick house near Forsyth Park. We planted dogwoods out front. They bloomed every spring without fail. From the outside, it looked like we had everything figured out. Jenna joined marching band. Noah built elaborate school projects from cardboard and glue. I worked part-time doing family therapy. Gavin transitioned into engineering. We had a favorite booth at the local pancake house and a Saturday morning routine that hadn't changed in years. Our life was quiet, familiar, rhythmic. But about a year ago, the rhythm changed. The house was still full of sound, but the texture of it shifted. The dishwasher still ran. Jenna's music still leaked under her door. Gavin's tools still clinked in the garage, but the laughter faded. The spaces between sounds stretched out longer. Gavin started working late, not the occasional deadline, but a pattern. Nights where he'd come in at 11 with no explanation except ran long. He stopped mentioning details about his day. He was still kind, still helpful, still Gavin, but something in his presence was different. His voice lost its warmth, his smiles arrived a second too late, and the way he touched me changed, not less often, but more cautiously, as if he was careful not to leave fingerprints. I told myself it was stress, that maybe he felt distant because I was tired too. We were both aging into the quiet part of marriage, the part where love becomes something you maintain, not something you chase. But I'm a therapist. I know the signs. And deep down, I saw them. Then Camille got engaged. She came back from Charleston glowing like she always did after falling in love, or convincing herself she had. We were sitting at my kitchen table when she showed me the ring, an emerald-cut diamond on a vintage gold band. She said Derek proposed on the rooftop of a boutique hotel at sunset. It was perfect, she said, laying her hand flat so the diamond caught the light. He had candles, a violinist. You'd have cried. I probably would, I told her. I smiled, but my chest felt tight. I didn't know why at the time. Gavin came over to admire the ring. Wow, he said with a low whistle. That's real commitment. Camille giggled. Some of us get there eventually. It sounded like a joke, but something about it landed wrong, like a sharp fork scraping the wrong plate. Later that night, I asked Gavin what he thought of Derek. He shrugged. He seems nice. A bit stiff. You don't think he's right for her? He looked at me for a second too long. Camille doesn't want someone who's right. She wants someone who stares at her like she's a fire they can't put out. That was the first time I heard the way he said her name. With too much history, too much familiarity. I remember noticing it, and then deliberately choosing not to ask. Weeks passed. Camille started showing up more. She brought flower samples and Pinterest boards. She invited herself to dinner, offered to help in the kitchen. She laughed louder at Gavin's dry humor than I did, and slowly, she became a fixture in our home. One evening, I walked into the kitchen and saw her barefoot, wearing one of Gavin's old college t-shirts. My body went cold. She said she'd spilled sauce on her blouse and grabbed it from the laundry. Her voice was casual, almost sweet. I forced a laugh and told her it was fine. But that night, as I lay beside Gavin in bed, I stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Something inside me had started to unravel. I felt it, not in words, not even in thoughts, just a weight pressing on the place where peace used to live. And I think, somewhere beneath all my denial, I knew. I just didn't want to know. Not yet. The morning of the wedding arrived like something from a storybook. Clear blue skies stretched across Savannah, not a cloud in sight, and Bellwood Estate glowed under the soft October sun. The scent of lemon blossoms drifted across the lawn, mixing with rosemary from the kitchen garden. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Like someone had orchestrated every second to distract from what was real. I stood in front of the mirror in the dressing room, adjusting the slate blue gown Camille had picked for her bridesmaids. It fit beautifully, but it didn't feel like mine. The fabric was smooth and cool against my skin, but something about it felt performative. The color, she had said, was chosen because it flattered everyone. I knew Camille well enough to know she didn't care about what flattered others. She cared about what flattered her. Gavin walked in behind me, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked sharp, clean-shaven, tailored navy suit, fresh cologne I hadn't smelled on him in months. I looked at him in the mirror, studying the man who used to feel familiar. He caught my glance and smiled gently. "You okay?" he asked, straightening his tie. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Big day." Noah stood quietly near the window, clutching the cuff of his jacket. He hadn't said much that morning. He didn't need to. I had slipped Camille's phone back into her bag without saying a word to anyone. Not yet. I needed time to decide what this moment would mean and what it would cost. Jenna, radiant in her dress, was helping Camille with her hair in the bridal suite. I watched them from the doorway for a second. My daughter, calm and graceful. My sister, luminous as always. Her laugh floated across the room like a melody she had rehearsed 100 times. "You're here," Camille said, spotting me in the mirror. She stood and turned, arms outstretched. She hugged me, tightly, almost too tightly. "You always make things feel real, you know that?" she whispered. "This day means more with you in it." I stepped back. "Well, I'm here." She smiled, held my gaze a second longer than necessary. It felt like something unspoken passed between us. A test. A dare. We moved into photos, posed under flower arches and twinkling lights, smiling like nothing was out of place. Camille beamed. Gavin kept his distance but smiled when the camera found him. Everything looked seamless. But beneath it all, I felt the weight of something about to tip. And then it happened. We were lining up for the procession when Camille turned to me, took my hands and said, "I want you and Gavin to walk me down the aisle." I blinked. "What?" "You're the most important people in my life," she said. "It just feels right." There were guests watching. Jenna, the photographer, Noah. Gavin raised his eyebrows in surprise, then shrugged with that practiced grin of his. "All right," he said casually, as if this wasn't a twist written to knock the breath out of me. I looked down at our hands, hers in mine, his about to rest on her arm, and something inside me shifted. This wasn't about honor. It wasn't about family. It was about control. She knew what she was doing, and I could see it now. This wasn't just a wedding. It was her stage, and I was standing in the wrong role. Noah met my eyes from the back row. He looked unsure, like he was waiting for me to do something. Jenna was frozen, bouquet in hand, eyes on me. I took a breath, held it. Then I smiled. Just enough. "Of course," I said, because this wasn't the moment I would burn it down. Not yet. As we stepped into the aisle, cameras flashing and music swelling, I became two people. One who smiled, walked, posed, and one who watched everything from somewhere else, behind my own eyes, beneath the lace and the lighting and the laughter. The woman Gavin held didn't flinch, but she wasn't me. Not fully. Not anymore. The guests rose to their feet as Camille made her entrance. Gavin stood on one side of her, I on the other, as we walked her toward Derek. Each step felt surreal. The aisle was long, lined with petals, guests whispering and smiling, believing they were watching a sacred moment. I wondered if any of them would still be smiling if they knew, if they'd still call it love if they heard the recording I did. Camille squeezed my hand at the halfway point. The gesture might have seemed sweet to anyone else, but to me, it was a warning, a message, a flex. Her skin was cool, but her grip was firm. She knew what she was doing. She always had. At the altar, she kissed Derek on the cheek and turned to me. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was soft, but something in it scraped against me like sandpaper. Gavin stepped back to his seat. I stood there a second longer than necessary, eyes meeting Camille's. I nodded once and walked away. The ceremony itself was beautiful in a hollow sort of way. The officiant spoke of loyalty, of building a life rooted in honesty and trust. Derek's vows were tender. Camille's voice trembled just enough to be believable. Everyone dabbed their eyes. I kept mine dry. When they kissed, the guests erupted into applause. Jenna clapped. Noah didn't. I noticed. The reception was held under a white tent draped in lights, with jazz music floating through the air and signature cocktails named after their dogs. Gavin offered to get me a drink, but I declined. I didn't want anything that came from his hand. I watched him walk away, his movements too relaxed for someone who should have been terrified. I mingled, politely, smiled at relatives, congratulated Derek's mother, let Camille have her spotlight. And all the while, I watched. The way she looked at Gavin when she thought no one saw. The way he watched her back when he didn't think I was looking. They weren't clumsy. They were deliberate, practiced. This wasn't new. This was routine. At one point, I found myself standing at the edge of the tent, overlooking the gardens. Jenna joined me, holding a lemonade. "You okay, Mom?" I nodded. "You did beautifully today." "You seem sad." I hesitated. Sometimes weddings are strange, that's all. She leaned against me. It felt strange. Aunt Camille seemed different. I looked down at my daughter, sharp as ever. I wanted to tell her, but it wasn't time. Not yet. Inside, speeches began. Camille's best friend delivered a tearful toast. Derek's brother followed with a funny story. And then, to my shock, Camille called Gavin to the microphone. "He's known me since I was a teenager," she said. "He's basically family. Gavin, come say something." He looked caught off guard but recovered fast. Gavin always recovered fast. He walked to the front and took the mic. "Camille," he began, "watching you today. I'm proud of the woman you've become. You've always been radiant, but now you're rooted too. Derek, take care of her. She deserves everything." It was short, it was clean, but it made my skin crawl. When he sat back down, our eyes met. He smiled again. That same measured, careful smile. And I realized something. He didn't think I'd do anything. He thought I'd swallow it like always. Play nice. Keep the peace. He didn't know I'd already decided. As the evening wore on, I asked Noah to stay close to Jenna. I found Camille's bag near the bridal suite. The phone was still inside. I stepped out into the twilight, phone in hand, and pressed play on the memo one more time. Camille. "You know what I like about this hotel? No one asks questions." Gavin. "You always did like getting away with things." Camille. "Renee always sees what she wants to see." I stopped it there. I opened the gallery. There were more photos, not just the ones Noah had seen, recent ones. A video, a voice message from 2 nights ago. "Camille, I want you to be the last thing I see before I say I do." My fingers tightened around the phone. I walked back inside, calm, steady. The next part had to be perfect. If I was going to destroy the illusion, I needed to make sure no one could deny what came next. Not Camille, not Gavin, and especially not me. Because beneath all the lace and laughter, this wasn't a love story. It was a hidden betrayal, and it was about to come into the light. The first dance came like a dream sequence, too soft, too perfect, like someone pressed slow motion on a fantasy I didn't believe in. Camille and Derek moved to a classic Etta James song beneath the fairy lights, her dress flowing like silk poured over ice. Guests watched in adoration, phones lifted, eyes misty. I watched too, but not them. I watched Gavin, standing just far enough to seem uninvolved, yet close enough to witness every glance Camille threw his way. He laughed at something her father said. He clinked glasses with Derek's cousin. He fit in too well. It made my stomach turn. After the formal dances ended, guests flooded the floor. Jenna danced with Noah. Camille spun with Derek's father. I stayed at the edge, clutching my clutch like it might anchor me to the floor. Then Gavin appeared, hand outstretched. "Dance with me?" he asked, smiling like we were still a couple, still believable. I wanted to say no. I wanted to scream. But I knew eyes were watching, and I needed time. So I placed my hand in his and let him lead me into the crowd. The music shifted to something slower, jazzy. His hand settled on my back. Too familiar, too confident. I kept my smile light, my body stiff. "You look beautiful tonight," he said, voice low. "You don't," I replied, just loud enough for him to hear. He chuckled softly. "Still mad at me?" "You have no idea." We moved together like nothing was wrong, like he hadn't just toasted the woman he was betraying me with, like my world hadn't shifted beneath my heels. It was surreal, like acting in a scene someone else wrote. "You could have said no, you know," he said, "to walking her down the aisle." "So could you," I shot back. That silenced him. For a beat. Then he leaned closer. "You wouldn't ruin your sister's wedding. Not you." I smiled. Not because he was right, but because he was wrong in all the ways that would matter soon. As the song ended, I stepped back, giving a small curtsy like it was all a game, like none of it cut me to pieces. I turned and walked off the floor without looking back, but not before slipping his phone from his pocket. Yes, that was the plan. One act of performance traded for another. While the guests laughed and danced and raised glasses, I disappeared into the bridal suite. It didn't take long. Gavin's passcode hadn't changed. I tapped into his photo roll. New selfies, one from the hotel bar, time-stamped the night before last. Camille's reflection in the mirror behind him, a video of her laughing in bed, her voice saying, "She doesn't know, does she?" But I wasn't done. There were texts. Dozens. Saved voice notes. "Camille, you'll still leave her, right? Once this is done?" "Gavin, you know I will. She's not like you." "Camille, she never was." It burned, but not like fire. Like acid. Slow, eroding everything I thought I knew. I forwarded them all to my private email, every file, every lie. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my attorney, not to scream or cry, just to ask one question. If I needed to file for divorce tomorrow, what would I need to bring to the meeting? He asked if I was okay. "I will be," I said. When I returned to the reception, Gavin was laughing with his hand on Camille's shoulder. They looked up at the same time and saw me standing beneath the tent lights, watching. I smiled again. It wasn't a smile of forgiveness. It was the smile of someone who had just pulled the pin from a grenade, silently. Word count, approximately 1,030. Part 6, the email that shook the morning after. SEO keyword, emotional fallout. I barely slept, not from regret, but from clarity. When I woke the next morning in the guest house behind my sister's new marital estate, the silence felt surgical, like someone had cut out all the noise I used to mistake for peace. My daughter was still asleep on the pull-out bed beside mine, curled in a way that reminded me of when she was 4. Safe, oblivious. I didn't want to disturb her. So I dressed quietly, walked out to the patio with a steaming cup of black coffee, and opened my phone. The screen lit up with a single email notification, from myself. It had the subject line, "In case you forget." Inside were the forwarded texts, voice notes, screenshots, and 2 video files. I clicked through them one by one. Camille's voice, Gavin's laugh, his hand brushing hers, all time-stamped, all undeniable. Evidence not just of an affair, but of how easily they'd twisted my trust into something mockable. There was a moment when my thumb hovered over the delete button, not because I planned to erase anything, but because I wanted to prove to myself that I didn't need to look again. I didn't press it. Instead, I composed another email, this one addressed to Gavin. Subject, "Our story ends here." I didn't write a novel. I didn't scream in all caps. I just wrote, "Attached is everything I know. You've got 48 hours to vacate the house and remove your name from the joint account. Jenna stays with me. We'll handle the rest through attorneys. Do not contact me unless it's through legal counsel." I hit send. The moment I did, something left my body. A weight, maybe. Or maybe just the lie I'd been carrying, this idea that dignity meant silence. It didn't. It meant choosing which battles to make public, and which ones to end in the quiet morning light. Camille, of course, got her own email. It was even shorter. "Congratulations on the wedding. Consider this your last successful con." I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't get one. But I did get a text, from Gavin, an hour later. "Gavin, we should talk. Not like this." I didn't answer. Another text followed. "Gavin, please, don't do this." Then, later, "Gavin, you're overreacting." And finally, "Gavin, fine. You win." It was almost funny, how quickly the tone shifted, from guilt to bargaining to dismissal to surrender. None of it moved me. I closed my phone and stared at the rising sun. A cardinal landed on the edge of the railing, bright red against the pale sky. It chirped once, then flew off. Jenna stirred behind the screen door. "Mom? Out here, baby." She padded out in socks and my old college sweatshirt, sat beside me, head on my shoulder. "We're going home today, right?" "Yes." She didn't ask why, but after a minute she said, "I don't want to see Uncle Gavin again, ever." I nodded. "You won't have to." And we sat there, two people who had both seen too much, who were now rebuilding something quieter, truer. Not a revenge story, I realized, but a new chapter, written without liars. I barely slept that night, not because I was wrestling with what had happened, but because I was finally clear on what I had to do. My body lay in the unfamiliar guest bed of Camille and Derek's estate, but my mind was already moving, methodically, cleanly, through the aftermath, through freedom. The guest house was quiet except for the soft rustling of the trees outside and the occasional creak of the old wooden floor. Jenna was asleep beside me on the pull-out bed, breathing deeply, her cheek pressed into her arm like she used to do when she was a toddler. Seeing her so peaceful in the middle of everything gave me strength. I needed to protect that peace, for both of us. I rose without making a sound and padded across the room, slipping outside with my coffee into the crisp morning air. Dawn hadn't broken yet, but the horizon was beginning to soften, painted in grays and muted oranges. I opened my phone. One unread email. From me. Subject, "In case you forget." It was a backup I had prepared days ago, maybe unconsciously. Screenshots of texts between Gavin and Camille, voice notes, 2 video clips, one with them laughing too closely in a hotel room Gavin said he'd never stayed in. I opened each one again, not because I needed convincing, but because I wanted to remind myself. I wasn't imagining it. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was betrayal in high definition. I took a slow breath and then opened a new email draft, this one to Gavin. Subject, "Our story ends here." I didn't scream or explain, just typed with steady fingers. "Attached is everything I know. You have 48 hours to leave the house and withdraw from our joint account. Jenna stays with me. All communication goes through legal counsel now." I attached the files and hit send. A rush passed through me, not adrenaline, not rage, just something firm and cleansing. The kind of rush that only comes after you make a choice that's long overdue. Camille's email was even shorter. "Enjoy your wedding. This was your last con." No attachments, no explanation, just enough to let her know the mask was off. At 6:27 a.m., Gavin's first text arrived. "Gavin, we should talk, not like this." At 6:43, "Gavin, Please, you're blowing this out of proportion. At 7:05, Gavin, don't make this ugly. And finally at 8:02, Gavin, fine, you win. I muted the thread. He didn't get to win. There was no contest, just the consequences of his choices arriving right on time. When Jenna woke up and found me sitting on the porch, she stepped outside in her socks and my oversized college sweatshirt. "Are we leaving today?" she asked, still groggy. "We are." She leaned into me, her head resting against my arm. "I don't want to ever see Uncle Gavin again." "You won't have to." She didn't ask questions. She didn't cry. She just accepted it. And in that moment, I felt something settle between us. A pact, quiet but powerful. We packed our things after breakfast. As we walked to the car, the estate behind us looked like a set on a stage, pretty from far away, but hollow up close. Before pulling out of the driveway, I opened my phone one last time and deleted Gavin's contact. No drama, no final words, just erasure. Back in the city, I met with an attorney, recommended by my friend Melissa, who'd gone through her own divorce the year prior. The lawyer was sharp, efficient, and had that kind of voice that made you believe no one could push you around again. After our consultation, she looked me dead in the eye. "You're not just reacting, you're rebuilding. That matters." That night, I cooked dinner for Jenna in our apartment, just pasta and garlic bread. Nothing fancy, but she beamed like I'd served a 5-star meal. As we ate, she said, "This feels like home again." And I realized she was right. The emotional fallout had shaken me, yes, but it had also cleared the wreckage. Now we could build. Back in Atlanta, everything felt smaller, but in the best way. Our apartment wasn't luxurious, but it was ours. No curated florals, no marble counters, just cozy chaos. Jenna unpacked her school bag, humming a Taylor Swift song under her breath, and for the first time in weeks, I heard music that didn't feel like background noise. It felt like life. The quiet of our home was not empty anymore. It was restorative. 3 days passed without word from Camille or Gavin. Not a call, not an apology, just static silence, which, frankly, said more than anything they could have spoken. On the 4th day, a thick envelope arrived in the mail, addressed to me in Gavin's handwriting. No return address. I stood at the kitchen counter for a long minute before opening it. Inside were 3 things: a handwritten letter, a printed photograph of Jenna and me at a beach trip years ago, and a folded cashier's check for $18,000. I read the letter. "Renee, I don't know what to say. I know I don't deserve to be heard. I know I hurt you, and that this isn't something I can fix. I also know I should have told you the truth the moment I started feeling something I shouldn't have. But I was weak, selfish, and I've ruined something I once thought I'd never lose. This money isn't an apology. It's a start, a way to step out of your way, as you asked, and to make sure you and Jenna are taken care of until things are finalized. I won't contact you again unless your lawyer initiates. I promise. I know silence is all I can offer now, and I intend to keep that. Take care of her. And of yourself. Gavin." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I folded the check back into the envelope and placed it in the drawer where we kept Jenna's school forms and leftover birthday candles. I'd hand it to my attorney. As for the photo, it was the hardest part. I stared at it. Jenna in her little polka-dot swimsuit, grinning wide, arms around my neck. Gavin behind us, half out of frame, smiling with a kind of ease I now understood wasn't earned. It was performance. I slipped the photo into a box marked Keep, but buried it under old report cards and her first drawing of a horse. Not because I wanted to remember him, but because she deserved to decide for herself, one day, what parts of her past to keep. That night, I sat on the couch, laptop open, scrolling listings for a second-hand dining table. Jenna walked in with 2 mugs of hot cocoa she'd microwaved herself. She handed me one and curled up beside me. "Did you ever love him?" she asked suddenly. I didn't dodge it. "Yes, I did. For a long time." "Did he love you?" I took a breath. "Maybe. In the way he knew how. But not in the way I deserved." She nodded slowly, her lips forming that tight line she made when she was processing more than she let on. I think I'd rather have this. Just you and me. I kissed the top of her head. Me too. Later that week, I got a voicemail from Camille's maid of honor, of all people. Hi, Renee. I wasn't sure I should even call, but I felt you should know. Camille's been let go from her job. Her firm found out about the affair. She used company funds to fly Gavin out once. HR reviewed everything. She's on unpaid leave pending further investigation. Just thought you deserved to know. I didn't respond. What was there to say? Camille had built a castle out of half-truths and borrowed names. Eventually, the tide came in. I went to sleep that night not with a smile, but with stillness. And sometimes, that's better. The morning of the custody hearing, the sky over Fulton County Courthouse was the color of steel, like the day already knew it would hold someone's truth in its teeth. I wore navy, clean lines, minimal makeup. Jenna's backpack strap was looped over my wrist like a tether, even though she wasn't with me. She was at school, unaware that today, in a wood-paneled room filled with strangers and fluorescent lighting, her future was being debated by people who once claimed to love each other. Gavin showed up late, unshaven, wearing a wrinkled button-down he hadn't tucked in. Camille wasn't with him. My attorney Nancy whispered, "That's good. No show means no statement of character on his behalf." The judge called us in. No jury, just a family court case number and too much history. Gavin's lawyer opened with a generic plea for shared custody. He cited my previous work travel, our dual incomes, and the fact that Jenna was accustomed to a certain standard of living. I nearly laughed. My attorney responded with poise and sharp facts. The affair, the secrecy, Gavin's absences, my primary caretaker role for the past 10 years. She even showed the judge the email I'd written, the one where I gave Gavin 48 hours to vacate and cease contact. Gavin avoided my eyes the whole time. Then the judge asked if I had anything to add. I stood. Your Honor, my daughter deserves stability. She deserves to wake up in a home where she doesn't question her worth, where no one treats her mother like an afterthought. This isn't about punishment. It's about protection. Gavin left our marriage long before he walked out the door, and now he wants to walk back in and expect the same access, the same privilege, without the responsibility. I'm here because she deserves better. The courtroom fell silent. Even Gavin's lawyer blinked twice. The judge took a long breath and nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Caldwell. We recessed for an hour. I waited on a hard bench outside the courtroom, watching the rain begin to streak the windows. When the clerk returned, I stood before the bench again, pulse steady. The judge's voice was calm but resolute. Temporary full custody is granted to the mother, Renee Caldwell. The father will be permitted supervised visits pending a formal psychological evaluation and a review of financial standing. Gavin's mouth opened like he wanted to object, but he didn't. Outside the courtroom, he finally looked at me. You really want to keep her from me? I looked him square in the eye. Number, you did that yourself. Nancy and I left without another word. I didn't cry until I was back in the car, engine running, forehead against the steering wheel. Not because I was sad, but because I finally felt safe. And safety, after chaos, is the loudest relief there is. That evening, Jenna handed me a drawing she'd made at school. It was of us, just the two of us, under a rainbow. She'd written in crayon, "Home equals Mom." I didn't frame it. I taped it to the fridge, right where it belonged. Life, for a while, settled into something that resembled peace. Jenna and I had our routines, breakfast with pancakes that were sometimes too crispy on one side, school drop-offs with mismatched socks, evening walks to the corner bookstore. The chaos was ours, and we were healing. That's why it hit harder when I found it, the text I was never meant to see. It started as a regular Tuesday. Jenna was at a sleepover, and I had an early morning conference call. My phone died in the middle of the night, so I borrowed her tablet to check my work messages. As soon as I opened the browser, a text notification banner popped up. It was from a number saved under Cam. I didn't want to look, but I did. Did she sign the asset release form? We need that for the Bahamas transfer. Hurry, before she figures it out." I froze, not just because it was Camille's number, but because the message was recent, as in sent 2 days ago. I tapped the conversation open, heart thudding in my ears. The thread was filled with back-and-forth messages between Gavin and Camille, transactions, plans, mentions of offshore accounts, of my name on shared properties I never agreed to transfer, of forged digital signatures. One message said, "Her lawyer hasn't caught it yet, but he will." Another, "Let's just get through the review window. After that, she can't contest." My throat went dry. They weren't just cheating, they were still conspiring. After everything, after court, I snapped screenshots, all of them. Then I sat perfectly still, the tablet resting on my lap as the fury rose like wildfire. Not the kind that burns hot and fast, but the slow, pulsing kind that clarifies every decision. I called Nancy, sent the evidence. She called back in less than 10 minutes. "Renee, this isn't just contempt of court. This is fraud. This is felony level. And if Camille used work resources to facilitate this again, she's looking at criminal exposure." I whispered, "I don't want revenge. I want this to stop." Nancy said, "Then we play this smart. We freeze all transfers. File an emergency motion. Let them come into the courtroom and explain this to a judge." By Friday, Gavin had a court summons delivered to his work. Camille's legal firm received a subpoena. And I went about my day as usual, made pancakes, bought Jenna a new pair of glitter shoes, let her pick the bedtime story. The next day, Camille called. I didn't answer. Then she texted. One line, "Please, don't do this. You don't know what you're starting." I stared at it for a full minute. Then I replied, "You already started it. I'm just finishing it." The courtroom was colder this time, not in temperature, but in spirit. The air carried tension so sharp you could almost hear it hum. Gavin sat to my left, his attorney whispering furiously into his ear. Camille sat 3 rows behind him, arms crossed so tightly it looked like she might implode. No one spoke to her, not even her new lawyer. I sat beside Nancy, who tapped her pen rhythmically against her notepad, eyes narrowed in quiet fury. The judge, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her late 60s, called the session to order. Her name was Judge Henley. I'd seen her once before, in the custody hearing, where she was firm but fair. But this was different. This was a federal financial fraud case, triggered by a series of emergency motions and evidence submissions Nancy had masterfully compiled. "Ms. Turner," the judge said, her voice clear and cutting, "you may take the stand." I walked slowly, deliberately to the front of the room. It felt like the longest 10 steps of my life. The bailiff swore me in, and I looked out, not at Gavin, not at Camille, but straight ahead. Because this wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. Nancy's questioning was clean, precise. She showed the screenshots, asked me to confirm what device they came from, whether I had altered them. I hadn't. And when I discovered them, she submitted bank statements, the timestamps on the forged transfer authorizations, and even a timeline Gavin himself had previously testified to. All of it built the case, like bricks stacked, unshakable. But it was the cross-examination that brought the shift. Gavin's lawyer tried, desperately, to twist my narrative. "Isn't it true, Ms. Turner, that you had access to these accounts and might have misunderstood financial movements taken in good faith?" I looked him square in the eye. Number. Because good faith doesn't require forged signatures and offshore banking advice from someone sleeping with your sister. That's not a misunderstanding. That's betrayal. And it's illegal. The gallery murmured. Judge Henley raised her hand and silence fell again. Gavin never looked at me. Camille did, and I'll never forget her face, not angry, not smug, just small, like a balloon that had been slowly losing air for weeks and finally gave up. After testimony closed, we were dismissed for an hour-long recess. Outside, in the hallway, Nancy turned to me. We nailed it. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt emptied. But sometimes, clarity doesn't come with a parade. It comes with a quiet hallway and the knowledge that you stood up for yourself when it mattered most. Back in the courtroom, the judge called the room to attention. The court finds that evidence submitted shows a pattern of intentional fraud and willful misconduct. Mr. Gavin Clark is hereby ordered to pay restitution and is subject to further criminal review. Ms. Camille Clark is in violation of ethics policies in connection with her firm and is to be reviewed by the State Bar. All asset transfers are frozen until further audit. Gasps. Then silence. I stood up. So did Gavin, but I turned and walked out first. I didn't need to see him again. I didn't need to wait for his eyes to plead. I had done what I came to do. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of anything anymore. The courtroom was behind us, but the weight hadn't lifted. That evening, Jenna and I sat curled on the couch. A cartoon flickered across the TV screen, but neither of us was watching. My body ached with the kind of fatigue that only shows up after adrenaline leaves. The house was quiet. Too quiet, and I realized I hadn't spoken more than 10 words since we got home. Jenna finally turned toward me, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom?" "Yes, baby." She looked down at her lap, where her fingers twisted a corner of her blanket. "Was it because of me? That Dad got mad and Camille got mean?" I blinked. The air thinned. "No," I said immediately, sitting up. "Absolutely not. None of this is your fault." Her little mouth quivered. "But you said court was about what's fair. If people are fair, why does it hurt?" I could feel it. That old ache in my chest. Like my heart had been reopened. She wasn't asking about court. She was asking about the world, about love, about betrayal. At just 7 years old. I pulled her close, wrapping both arms around her. Sometimes people who are supposed to protect us, they forget how. Or they choose not to. And it's not your fault. It's not even about you. It's about their choices, their selfishness. She nodded slowly, eyes watery. "And you know what?" I added, brushing hair from her forehead. "We're going to be okay. Because you and I, we tell the truth. We stay kind. We love each other out loud. That's how we stay strong." She didn't say anything after that. She just rested her head on my chest and stayed there until sleep carried her away. I sat awake, watching the ceiling, letting tears slide silently into my hair. This wasn't victory, not really. What we had been through left marks, but maybe that's what healing looks like. Not absence of pain, but the courage to keep showing up for the ones we love, scars and all. The next morning, I found a note in Jenna's backpack. It was a drawing of our house. Crayon-colored walls, flowers in the window, and a stick figure of me holding her hand. She wrote under it in messy letters, "This is the safe house. Mom said so." I kissed the note. I folded it and tucked it into my wallet. Because no matter what courtrooms we step into or what betrayals come, this was the truth we'd live by. It was a Sunday. The kind of crisp autumn morning where the sun cuts through red leaves and the air smells like cinnamon and firewood. Jenna was out back, raking little piles of leaves into what she called squirrel beds. I was sipping lukewarm coffee on the porch when I heard it. A knock, not loud, not urgent, just unsure. I opened the door, and there she was. Camille. She looked smaller. Not physically. Her posture had always been sharp, her clothes impeccable. But something was gone from her eyes. The armor, the smugness. All that was left was fatigue. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I stared at her for a long moment, then stepped aside. She sat at my kitchen table like it was a stranger's house. Hands folded, not touching the coffee I offered. She looked around like she couldn't quite believe she'd made it through the door. "I lost my license," she said after a pause. "The firm suspended me pending the ethics board. I had to move back in with Mom. Gavin's gone. He skipped town the day after sentencing. His accounts are frozen. Mine too." I stayed quiet. "I know I deserve worse," she whispered. I took a deep breath. "Why did you come here?" She looked up, and for the first time in a long time her eyes weren't defensive. They were grieving. "Because I don't want Jenna to grow up thinking this is how sisters treat each other, because I miss you, and because I'm sorry. I was so angry at how easy you made everything look. You always had people who loved you without conditions. I didn't understand that, and instead of learning from it, I tried to destroy it. The kitchen ticked with the sound of the clock. She continued, I know I can't undo anything, but I'm trying to change. I go to therapy. I volunteered at a shelter. I even wrote letters to every client I misled. Not because I think it fixes anything, but because it's the first time I've felt like I'm telling the truth. I looked at her. Really looked. This wasn't manipulation, not the old Camille I used to brace against. This was someone standing in the ash of everything she'd burned down, asking for nothing but the chance to say she saw it now. I didn't say, I forgive you, but I poured her another cup of coffee. We sat in silence for a long while, and when Jenna came running in, cheeks flushed, leaves in her hair, Camille stood up and said, Hi Jenna, it's good to see you. Jenna blinked, then offered a small wave. It wasn't a reunion, but it was a beginning. 1 year later, I almost didn't recognize my life, but in the best way. The dining table was smaller, but it fit us perfectly. The walls were still hand-painted by Jenna and me, each one a story. The coffee wasn't fancy, but it was warm. And the mornings? They felt like hours again. It had been 12 months since that courtroom, 11 since Gavin left the state, 10 since Camille lost her bar license officially, and 3 since Jenna stopped asking if we'd ever have to go back to court. We didn't. My practice had expanded. I now worked with women navigating betrayal, grief, and identity reconstruction, because I had lived every layer of that myself. I didn't preach, I didn't quote cliches, I just listened, and I reminded them they weren't broken, just becoming. Camille wrote once, a letter, no return address. It was long, messy, beautiful in some parts, self-pitying in others. But I could tell she was doing the work. She had started therapy. She moved out of Mom's house. She was working part-time at a shelter while attending ethics training. I didn't respond. But I kept the letter. Because forgiveness doesn't always need a reunion. Sometimes it just needs a quiet acknowledgement. I see your effort. I release my need to carry the rest. Jenna was thriving. She was 9 now. Fierce, funny, opinionated. She had a sticker collection, a new love of astronomy, and a best friend named Quinn who came over every Saturday. She no longer winced when someone mentioned her dad. She just nodded and said, We don't talk much. I didn't push. Some wounds heal by silence, others by naming them. Jenna was learning the difference. One night, as we lay under a makeshift blanket fort in the living room, she whispered, You know what I like most about our life now? What's that? I asked. She looked up at the sheet glowing from the fairy lights we'd strung across the room. It doesn't feel like something bad is waiting anymore. It just feels calm. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Yeah, baby, me too. And maybe that's the best kind of ending. Not fireworks, not revenge, just peace. A peace we built ourselves, out of the wreckage. If you'd asked me 2 years ago what survival looked like, I would have said endurance. Holding your breath, carrying pain with poise, getting through it. Now? I'd say something entirely different. Survival looks like rebuilding, not the kind with blueprints and measurements, the kind where every moment becomes a decision, a quiet, stubborn decision to keep choosing joy, even in the middle of the mess. Life after betrayal isn't clean. There's no magic day where it stops stinging. Some mornings still ache, some memories still scrape, but those moments no longer own me. They don't define me. The storm was brutal, and I walked through it carrying my daughter, my dignity, and the shredded pieces of a life I once thought was permanent. But I'd still choose the storm, because it gave me clarity, because it stripped away the lies I'd learned to live with, because it showed me the truth about strength, that it's not loud or pretty or perfect, it's quiet, it's consistent, it's showing up for yourself even when no one claps. I don't hate Gavin, not anymore. That would still make him a center point in my story. He's not. He's a footnote in a life that's fuller without him. As for Camille, she became the mirror I didn't ask for, the one that showed me what happens when resentment festers. I hope she heals. I hope she finds peace that doesn't come at someone else's expense. But her redemption isn't mine to write. My story belongs to me now. And Jenna? She's the chapter I'm proudest of. Every day I watch her become more herself. Brave, curious, unafraid to ask big questions. She reminds me that legacy isn't just what we leave, it's what we correct while we're here. So if you're reading this and you're somewhere between the betrayal and the breakthrough, please hear me. You're not broken, you're building. And the storm you're in, it might just be the wind clearing your path. If this story touched you, subscribe to Revenge by Seren. Because some revenge needs no knives, no screaming, just one spotlight, one shining nameplate, and someone they once dismissed, rising, brilliant and unshaken. See you in the next story.